Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today we're reacting to Top 10 Misconception About Hinduism from Swami Tadatmananda. So, with 10 misconception about Hinduism, misconception? I'm not sure. I would say the ideas that I have prior to watching these videos where they worship millions of gods, or there's so many gods, there's a god for everything. There's one god with a lot of avatars of that god, but that's about it. It was in fact a religion and not a way of life like how I know it now. You know, let's go and get started. I'll try not to talk too much. CC song.
Many of the questions people ask about Hinduism are based on certain common misconceptions that come up again and again. Some of those misconceptions are so widespread that they go unquestioned and are simply assumed to be true by Hindus and non-Hindus alike. Long ago, I put together a list of the most frequently repeated errors and called it the Top 10 Misconceptions About Hinduism. These topics are especially relevant today when we're continually bombarded by so much misinformation in print, on TV, on the internet, and social media. I've addressed each of these misconceptions very briefly here, but in other videos I've produced, many of these topics are addressed in much more depth. You'll find links to those videos below. Okay, we'll follow the style of other top 10 lists and start with misconception number 10, which happens to look a bit like a multiple choice quiz. The two famous epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, are A, mythological. Both epics are fictional tales of people who never lived and events that never really occurred. B, historical. Both epics are accurate accounts of bygone people and of past events exactly as they took place. The correct answer to this multiple choice question is actually C, none of the above, because both of these conclusions are wrong. To understand the Ramayana and Mahabharata properly, we have to consider how these great epics first emerged in ancient India. Long ago, stories about important historical events were preserved by passing them on orally from generation to generation, and also by writing them out in elegant Sanskrit verses meant for oral recitation. Those stories included the account of Rama, the son of King Dasharatha, and his struggle to rescue his wife Sita, who had been kidnapped by the demon Ravana. That story was put into written form by the Rishi Valmiki in his Ramayana. Another story recounted the lives of the Pandavas and Kauravas, and described in gory detail the horrendous war they fought. The Rishi Vyasa composed the Mahabharata based on that story. Valmiki and Vyasa were utterly unlike modern novelists who create stories with fictional plots and imaginary characters. Those rishis wrote about actual historical events. But they were also utterly unlike modern historians, academic scholars who record past events as accurately and objectively as possible. The tradition of storytelling in ancient India was to enrich historical stories by incorporating sections that convey important principles of worldly and spiritual wisdom. Also, the tradition was to embellish historical stories with fantastic tales and exciting fictitious events to ensure that future generations would be inspired to read them. Valmiki and Vyasa followed these cultural traditions when composing their epics. They expanded their works with powerful spiritual teachings, like the Bhagavad Gita, that's found in the Mahabharata.
I mean, that makes sense. You want to make your story exciting so that people will read it. Have some truth and some lesson in it as well. It's going to be kind of boring if you just like in 1958 he went here and did this. The next day he did that. It's kind of, I guess it's a balance between making it grand so that it's exciting to read and that future generations want to read, and also keeping it historically accurate as much as possible.
And they added fanciful accounts of chariots flying through the sky and amazing weapons with the destructive force of atomic bombs. So, the Ramayana and Mahabharata can't really be considered mythological or historical. They present historically true events in stories that were enriched by the addition of spiritual teachings and richly embellished with dramatic, fictitious events. Now, let's see misconception number 9. The caste system, prescribed by Hindu scriptures, is the cause for many social problems in India, both in years past and in modern times.
I would say, yeah, actually, I do believe my understanding of it prior to this and prior to reading the comments is that, well, it was something that was in India, and the fact that you have different levels, as in tiers up and lower, as in the higher tiers are more royal family, and the bottom tiers are like the untouchables or the sewage workers or the farmers or whatever it may be. And then you have the higher lords, or more pristine class that can't touch dirty things or whatever it may be. It's like a tier system of the higher you are, the more pristine and good you are, as opposed to just the different caste systems. More specifically, talk like where farmers are all farmers, which makes sense because if your father was a farmer or whatever it may be, they teach you how to farm because that's what you know and that's how you make your money. And then you have like fish farmers, and you have like people who knit like blankets or t-shirts and stuff. If that's your skill, you generally teach that to your children so that they're able to do that and make a living as well.
That's a tricky statement because part of it is true, but another part is not. Without doubt, what we now call the caste system is absolutely responsible for terrible oppression and mistreatment of countless people over the ages. And this dreadful problem continues even today. But what's not true about this statement is the contention that the caste system is actually prescribed by Hindu scriptures. The roots of the caste system actually predate the Vedas, the source scriptures for Hinduism. People have always formed social groups by associating with others who have similar activities and professions. But in ancient times, your profession was almost always determined by the family into which you were born. So, long before Hinduism began, 4 social groups already existed. Social groups based on your family and profession. There were teachers and priests, kings, ministers, and warriors, farmers and merchants, and paid laborers. Later, the Vedas referred to them as Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras. A famous Vedic hymn figuratively says Brahmanas came from God's mouth, Kshatriyas from his arms, Vaishyas from his legs, and Shudras from his feet. This hymn describes God as the source of all people, and at that time, people belonged to one of these four groups. Here's the symbolism. Brahmanas are said to have emerged from God's mouth because their work involves teaching and reciting prayers. Kshatriyas came from God's arms because their work involves wielding weapons and exercising power. Vaishyas came from God's legs because their work involves cultivation and travel. Shudras came from God's feet because laborers are the foundation upon which every society stands. Note that this hymn does not say that Brahmanas are superior to the others, or that Shudras are somehow inferior. The Vedas do prescribe different religious duties for each group, but they never prescribe or condone any kind of discrimination or inequality. Unfortunately, over the centuries, certain Brahmanas were apparently motivated by selfish interests, and they interpreted the Vedas in ways that benefited their own caste at the expense of others. As a result, an unjust and extremely harmful social structure gradually evolved. That unfair social structure was not based on Hinduism's source scriptures. It came instead from selfish, unethical people who happened to have been born as Hindus. This video I produced addresses the problem of casteism in a broader way. You'll find a link to it below.
So please do check out his channel. Subscribe if you want to for his. He does an amazing job at explaining things. I just can't help but just every time he talks, I understand. Not because he's English, but just his explanations and examples are so, well, to me, just very easy to understand. So, and actually I should probably check out that video next, because I want to do this in one video, and hopefully if I don't talk too much. But also at the same time, real quick, I'm going to throw out a hobby of mine out there, which something I was collecting prior to ever watching this videos. You can let me know in the comments below if you know this in general, and then in specific, and how it's related to, I guess, this particular incident. Let's see. It's probably blurry, but anyways, that model was painted by me. It looks like crap because I turned off autofocus just so I won't just keep freaking focusing all the time. But if you know that model, it's a hobby of mine that I do. So let me know in the comments below if you know the general aspect and then the specific aspect, and how is it related to this.
Misconception number 8 is another multiple choice question.
Multiple choice.
According to Hinduism, the goal of life is to A. Enjoy pleasure, B. Accumulate wealth, C. Achieve a better rebirth or go to heaven, D. Become free from rebirth. Which answer would...
Sorry, I wanted to pause it before he gave it away or before the thing changed. I would normally say initially all of the above, E. But at the same time, when it said achieve a better rebirth or go to heaven, C would have been the answer too, because assuming heaven is the release from samsara, this continuous rebirth. I will say prior to watching this video, it was C. Achieve better rebirth, to elevate up to a god, basically. Not necessarily that you're released from this world, just a god. And then now when you put D, actually that's kind of the, in a sense, the answer is to be released from this world. At the same time, the reason why I say all of the above is because there's nothing wrong with enjoying this life while you're here. Make it the best life you can possibly live, and if you can make other people happy, that's fantastic. Accumulate wealth, I don't necessarily, again, see anything wrong with that, as long as you're not harming anyone on the way. Enjoy pleasure. So I'm going to say my final answer is E, all of the above. I'm probably going to be wrong, though.
You choose. Well, the correct one is
Oh,
actually
what?
E, all of the above.
I would have.
Let me explain.
I swear, I figured he would say D, free from rebirth, honestly. But I would say E just because of my own personal beliefs and what I've heard from Osho, because Osho says that, yes, enjoy the wealth. He has like 50 Rolls Royce, one for every week or something like that. I'm like, that kind of blew my mind a little bit when I first heard him say that. But at the same time, it's like, as long as you're not harming anyone, it's fine.
Western religions accept only one goal of life, and that goal is to go to heaven and avoid eternal damnation after you die. But that biblical doctrine severely diminishes and degrades the value of your day-to-day life. After all, who cares what happens in this life as long as you get to heaven? In contrast, Hinduism prescribes not just one goal, but 4 goals: dharma, righteousness; artha, wealth; kama, pleasure; and moksha, liberation. By accepting kama as a valid goal of life, Hinduism affirms the value of your day-to-day life. Life is a gift given by God, meant for your enjoyment. Artha is also accepted as a valid goal of life because you need some money to support your pursuit of pleasure. It's virtually impossible to enjoy the gifts given by God if you're penniless and homeless. Of course, kama and artha must be pursued in ways that don't harm anyone or are immoral, illegal, or unethical. Next, since Hinduism accepts reincarnation, kama and artha are also meant to be pursued in your next life. For this reason, dharma, righteousness, is included among the 4 goals.
Dharma. I thought dharma was. I thought the definition of dharma was like your identities in the sense of your life, like as a coworker, as a father, son, mother, daughter, sister, brother, etc., friend, best friend, enemy, whatever it may be. Your dharma in life is your not your goal, but your role in life. You're supposed to play out your dharma. But here's defined as righteousness.
By following dharma and by avoiding adharma, you can accumulate good karma. And that good karma can lead you to have a better rebirth. Or if you've accumulated enough good karma, you could even go to heaven, Swarga. It's important to note that Hinduism does not consider going to heaven to be the ultimate goal of life. Why not? Because heaven is believed to be temporary. It's a limited lifetime of pleasure, born of your good karma, that eventually comes to an end. Your finite accumulation of good karma can't possibly result in infinitely long heavenly enjoyment. So, after enjoying a lifetime in heaven, you'll get reborn. Unfortunately, it's inevitable that you'll experience suffering in that next life. So, the 4th goal, moksha, is to escape all suffering, to remain utterly and eternally free from misery of any kind. Moksha literally means freedom. Moksha is not just freedom from being reborn into another life of suffering. it's also freedom from suffering in this life itself. We can't discuss the details of moksha here, but you can learn much more in this video I produced about the 4 goals of life.
I need to rewatch that, because I think I did react to it, but with very little understanding at the time I was watching it.
Now, let's see the 7th misconception, which is also a multiple choice question. As a human being, your life is A, predestined. Karma from your past lives determines the course of your life. B, directed by free will. Your own choices and actions determine the course of your life.
Okay, I guess he paused for long enough for it and say, I have a feeling he's going to say it's a balance between both. Your choices and actions determines the course of your life. Karma from your past lives will determine the course. Yeah, he's going to say a third one, a C, which is going to be the fact that he's going to say predestined stuff is going to happen in front of you, but you have the free will to choose how you handle that. Because he did say that in the, I think it was the last video, which is the grow or die thumbnail that he had up there. I have a feeling he's going to say that. Obviously, so far, every one of the multiple choice questions has always had a third option. And I think the third option is going to be karma karma from your past lives will alter the course of your life, but you have the free will on how you handle it. Whether you handle it then and there, or whether you kind of wait, because it happened, you wait out your whatever you're going to do, maybe a couple of days, years, months down the line, and then to partake in it. But it will affect you in some way, but you have the free will to how and when you want to handle it.
As you might have guessed, the correct answer is C, none of the above. The doctrine of karma is a huge and complicated topic, but we can address this question briefly here. First of all, if the course of your life is truly predestined, if everything that you'll do today is predetermined by your karma, then that means you have no free will. You have no freedom or power to make choices and act in ways that affect your life. But obviously, that's not what you experience each day. You do make choices, you make decisions, and you act as you choose. It's important to understand that the entire doctrine of karma is based on free will. By definition, karma is the result of actions that you perform by using your free will. If you didn't have free will, you couldn't have accumulated any karma in your past lives. And without any past karma, you wouldn't have been reborn into this life. But even though free will is central to the doctrine of karma, your free will is extremely limited. You can't choose to fly like a bird or decide to cure cancer. As a human being, you're not all-powerful like God. Since you don't have total command over the people and situations in your life, your power to control your life is limited. Based on all this, we have to say that the course of your life is neither completely predestined, nor is it completely in your control. Then, how shall we understand it? According to the doctrine of karma, the course of your life is determined by 2 different kinds of karma. One kind is the result of deeds you committed in past lives and earlier in this life. The good deeds you committed before will eventually bring desirable events into your life. The bad deeds you committed before will eventually bring undesirable events into your life. But that's only half the story. Regardless of what kind of events occur in your life, you can freely choose how you respond to each event. You can choose your response because you have free will. So, in addition to your past karma, your life is affected by a second kind of karma, the actions you choose to perform with your free will. Therefore, the course of your life is partly determined by past karmas and partly determined by the actions you choose. To understand the doctrine of karma more thoroughly, you might find it helpful to watch the videos in this playlist on my channel.
I love the fact that everything he's talked about, well, not everything, but most of the things he's talked about here, he has a video where he goes in depth, and that video I did was, I think that's one of the first ones I reacted to his, which is still, again, I gotta go back and watch him with all the knowledge that I've obtained by watching his videos until now. I have a feeling I'll have a completely different perspective from a lot of the videos that I watched earlier in this channel.
Now, let's see misconception number 6. To properly follow dharma, righteousness, we must always A. Strictly obey all the rules mandated by Hindu scriptures. B. Look into our own hearts and follow our conscience. By now,
Oh, none of the above. What would I have said? Should we obey all the rules? From all the videos I've watched, I've never heard of any rules. There are methods, but they're not rules. Look into our own hearts to follow our conscience. That I can see it a little bit. B, it's more along the lines, not necessarily our hearts, but I guess it's more of hearts and your thoughts and everything to seek Dharma, seek the truth and just be honest. So I'm not sure what I would answer. Probably I would have never said A. B, I would say it's a little bit on it, because there's not rules in Hinduism, it's more like methods and ways. And I say B, it's not quite complete, but it does have, you do follow your heart and your conscience and make sure you make good decisions.
you figured out that the correct answer is C, none of the above. Hinduism's approach to dharma is highly nuanced. Unlike Western religions, Hindu scriptures don't mandate a list of commandments. Why not? This approach can lead to many problems. For example, one commandment in the Bible says, "Thou shalt not kill." But what about soldiers on a battlefield defending their country from invaders who are ruthless and tyrannical? Another commandment says, "Honor thy father and thy mother." But what if your father is a criminal who sells heroin and other illicit drugs? Shouldn't you report him to the police? The problem with commandments is that for every rule, there are many exceptions.
Sorry, I was like, what about the mother? It said honor the father and mother. Well, what if your mother is a bad example of like doing, not correct things in life, to maybe partaking with the father?
Sometimes even the exceptions have exceptions.
Oh, Jesus.
That's why attorneys and judges in thousands of courtrooms struggle to understand the maze of statutes found in massive volumes of civil and criminal law. Based on this, defining dharma according to a system of commandments would be both confusing and cumbersome. As an alternative to commandments, some people believe that it's best to follow your conscience instead. Unfortunately, conscience can also be a poor basis for dharma in certain situations. As you know, conscience is your natural, inborn sense of right and wrong. It develops while you're growing up as a result of being praised and scolded by authority figures in your life, especially by your parents. If your parents were good role models, your conscience is probably a reliable guide for dharma. But that's not the case for everyone. If your father was a drug dealer, you might grow up thinking that selling drugs is okay. It's possible for someone's conscience to be damaged or defective. So, conscience cannot be accepted as the final authority on dharma. For these reasons, dharma is based neither on commandments nor on conscience. Instead, Hindu scriptures say, ahimsa paramo dharmaha. The ultimate basis for dharma is ahimsa, the absence of harm, harmlessness. Dharma is based on the simple principle of least harm. In every situation, you're required to determine and follow the course of action that results in the least harm for everyone involved. But sometimes it's not obvious which path leads to the least harm. In those situations, you should seek advice from those who are wiser than you. When properly understood and applied, this principle of least harm is a reliable guide for following dharma in any and all situations.
Interesting. I do kind of follow that in some sense that obviously nonviolence. Now, I'm not saying that you can't defend yourself. That's like you were saying the example about the soldier, about like a tyrannical government or whatever coming into your country or whatever and trying to control or do harm. Obviously, you can fight back. You can defend yourself. You can defend your country. You can defend helpless people. But obviously, harm, physical harm, as being the last resort. And now words. To me, I guess some people find words to be as hurtful as physical harm. But me personally, it's a matter of ego, I suppose. Trying to think. Sadhguru said this. He didn't say this. He said something along the lines of like, "I can say whatever I want. If other people get offended by it, it's not my problem." And it's more along the lines of the fact that I have control over this body, and they have control over theirs. If they get offended by words, that's in a sense their problem because it's merely words and they're controlling their body, even though in terms of probably people who don't follow or understand these ways, that no, their words brought this emotion out of me. It's like, well, no, yeah, in some sense, but no, because you have control over your body. Like, there's a word here you don't get offended by, but if this same word is said to someone else and they get offended, why does it offend them but not you? What makes this word, why is it different from that person to that person? It's because in their mind the word is offensive, but to you it's not. So the word itself is not offensive. It's something in you that you find the word to be offensive. You are in control of your body. You can literally find this word not to be offensive, and then you won't get offended. But if you want to find this word offensive, then you will get offended. So the thing is, the word is not offensive. You are finding the word to be offensive, and you yourself are getting yourself offended or upsetting yourself. So that's a big thing, I think. I think people in modern times are becoming so soft in the sense that words are so hurtful, and people are becoming easily offended. Where when you're struggling with the three things: food, water, and shelter, offense are out the window because you're worrying about those three things. But once those three things are taken care of, now you have 99 problems, like Sadhguru says.
Next, misconception number 5. Hindus worship the sun, cows, rivers, and idols made of stone or metal. The short answer here is that Hindus worship God and God alone. But then, what about sacred cows and holy rivers like the Ganges? Well, a famous passage in the Vedas says, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. Everything here is Brahman, God. That means everything in the universe, living and inert, is a form or manifestation of God. From a philosophical point of view, Brahman, or God, is the underlying reality because of which everything exists. God is the fabric of existence, so to speak. Like threads are the material because of which this cloth exists, God is the reality because of which the entire cosmos exists. Based on this principle, Hindus believe that God dwells within everything, in every person, animal, insect, plant, and rock. Therefore, everything is divine. So, Hindus worship God manifest in the form of the sun. Hindus worship God who dwells in every cow and river. Hindus worship God who is present in the sacred forms established on altars and temples around the world. Here, it's important to note that Hindus are not unique in their use of sacred forms for worship. Christians venerate the cross. Roman Catholics revere statues of Mary and great saints. Jews venerate ornate scrolls inscribed with the words of the Torah. None of those pious people worship mere physical objects. They use these sacred objects in their worship of God. Hindus do the same. This topic is explained much more completely in this video I produced about the symbolism of Hindu worship.
I watched that one too. Almost all the videos except for that one that I talked about.
The fourth misconception is relatively easy to address. Hinduism is polytheistic. Hindus worship many gods. You probably know that Hindus worship one God in many forms. The Rig Veda says, Ekam Sat, God is one, Vipra Bahudha Varanti, whom the wise address with many names. I'm puzzled by some Christians who insist that Hindus truly worship many gods. After all, Christians themselves worship God the Father, who dwells in heaven. They worship Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Savior of mankind, and they worship the Holy Spirit,
The
who
Trinity.
dwells in the hearts of believers. No Christian would call their religion tritheistic. So why do they say that Hinduism is polytheistic? In classes for children, I jokingly say that Christians worship one God in three forms, but Hindus, who like more variety, worship the same one God in 330 million different forms. On a more serious note, the Hindu concept of God is so sophisticated that philosophical terms like polytheism and monotheism fail to convey its unique perspective. Western religions are based on the doctrine of monotheism, which declares that God is one. But that one God is separate and different from the world and everything in it, including you and me. According to monotheism, God alone is absolutely good or divine, and everything that's different from God is not good, not divine. Therefore, the world and all its creatures are somehow evil in nature. Hinduism rejects this doctrine altogether. As we saw, Hindus believe that the world is a manifestation of God, and therefore everything that exists is divine in essence. But this particular belief sometimes leads to another mistaken notion, the view that Hinduism is pantheistic. Pantheism is a doctrine that declares the physical world itself is God. There is no God other than the world of nature. Many tribal religions that worship nature are based on this doctrine. But Hinduism is unlike these pantheistic religions because, for Hindus, the world is a manifestation of God, but God is more than the world. God exists both within the world and beyond it. To use the language of Western philosophers, God is both immanent, present in the world, and transcendent, existing beyond the world. So, neither polytheism, monotheism, nor pantheism accurately describe Hinduism's concept of God. For Hindus, God lies beyond all these Western ideas. Now, let's see misconception number 3. God punishes evil people for their bad deeds and rewards pious people for their good deeds.
This seems more like a Western one than, I don't know, like, at least from my understanding of Hinduism prior to these videos, I assume it's roughly the same as Western religion, or just, Abrahamic religion in general. Obviously, they punish bad people and reward good people. You follow your God, and whatever your God says you must do, whether it's written in some scriptures or book or whatever it may be, and those are the rules that you follow.
I was taught this as a child growing up in a Christian family. Yet many Hindus seem to believe it as well. This biblical teaching is accepted by many Hindus, perhaps because Christians have lived in India for centuries, and some of their beliefs have rubbed off, so to speak, on the Hindu population. The ancient sages explained that God's infinite intelligence is the basis for the laws of nature, the laws that govern how the universe works. So, the laws of nature are actually God's laws, and they include the laws of karma. Based on this principle, according to God's laws, you receive undesirable results for your bad deeds and desirable results for your good deeds. Therefore, you get the results that you yourself have earned by your own actions. If you break something in a store, you have to pay for it, but that's not a punishment. And when you get a paycheck after working all week, that's not a reward. You get what you deserve based on your own actions according to God's laws. For this reason, it's not accurate to say that God rewards you or punishes you. Also, Hinduism doesn't consider people who commit bad deeds to be evil in nature. After all, everyone is divine in essence. But divine beings are certainly capable of committing bad deeds, sometimes horrible, harmful deeds. In fact, we're all capable of committing bad deeds because we all make mistakes. As human beings, none of us are perfect in our thinking and behavior, even though we are all divine in essence.
I like that interesting thing he said about how God doesn't reward nor punish. You get what you deserve. I like that. I've heard, what is it? I've heard some phrases kind of similar to that, but I like that a lot better. That's a very interesting way of saying it, because it tends to be you're rewarded or punished for what you do. And his examples about, you getting a paycheck at the end of the week, it's not a reward, it's what you've earned. If you break something, you cause something to happen, you must pay for it, but not because I don't know, I won't say you did something bad. It's not that you intended to do something bad, but you have to kind of pay for the actions that you've done.
Next is a multiple choice question that shows several more misconceptions about God. A. God always gives us what we pray for. B. God sometimes gives us what we pray for. C. God never gives us what we pray for.
This will go back to this last one. You get what you deserve. So if you put in effort, you'll get whatever you deserve from that effort, I'm sure.
Once again, the answer is D, none of the above. And the doctrine of karma explains why. Prayer is a karma. It's an action, a good deed. It can be a mental act, like when you pray silently. It can be a vocal act, like reciting a Sanskrit hymn. Or it can be a physical act, like offering incense at an altar. Whether it's physical, oral, or mental, each form of prayer is a good karma, a good deed, and therefore it will surely produce a desirable result, according to the laws of karma. But there's no guarantee that you'll get the particular result you pray for. Think about it. If your prayers can make God give you exactly what you ask for, then apparently you're more powerful than God.
I also forgot to include that obviously your past karma actions will play into what you'll receive and when you'll receive it.
As we discussed before, God gives us what we deserve based on our own actions, including our acts of prayer. Finally, we come to the number one misconception about Hinduism. This item is first on the list not because it's somehow bigger or worse than the other 9 misconceptions. It's first because it's the most consequential of them all. It will affect every future generation of Hindus. In our modern times, Hinduism's ancient traditions and religious practices, A, have little or no meaning or relevance for our lives today. B, must be maintained exactly as they have been practiced for thousands of years to preserve Hinduism for future generations.
I'm laughing because I just love the fact that he gives out these multiple questions, knowing that we know now it's going to be none of these. Here, let me give you a multiple choice question. Is it A or B? You're right, it's neither, it's C. So, in modern times, ancient Hinduism's ancient traditions have little. I don't want to say it's A. Must be maintained exactly as they've been practiced for 1,000 years to preserve Hinduism. I'd say it's B for the most part. Obviously, there's going to be some. You have the extreme traditionalist group. I think Swami Sarvapriyananda's certain groups that stay in, I think in the Himalaya, I can't remember what groups they are, but they basically stay in certain areas in the mountains or somewhere, in the temples. And they are direct descendants of great sages that practice the tradition of it to the T. That way that tradition is kept throughout the entire generation.
You already know that the answer is C, none of the above. Why? First of all, the purpose of Hinduism, like all the world's faiths, is to serve the religious and spiritual needs of its followers. But those needs are constantly changing. For example, today, Hindus live not only in India, but all over the world, and they belong to a variety of societies and cultures. All those societies and cultures, both within India and elsewhere, are all continually evolving. Wherever you live, cultural norms today are vastly different than they were 100 years ago. Even in our own lifetimes, we see huge cultural shifts taking place all around us. As our cultures change, we also change. And not surprisingly, our religious and spiritual needs change as well. As a result, certain religious practices that nicely served our parents or grandparents long ago might not be meaningful or relevant for us today. For this reason, religious practices must constantly evolve so they can continue to meet our changing needs. If a religion fails to evolve and adapt itself to shifting circumstances, it won't survive. For example, the religion of ancient Egypt is a dead religion. No one practices it anymore. Fortunately, Hinduism's traditions and practices have indeed evolved over the centuries. In fact, they've evolved quite a bit, and they continue to do so, although many Hindus might rightly complain that this evolution isn't happening quickly enough. But some Hindus reject this concept of religious evolution. They claim that Hinduism's traditions have been carefully preserved over the centuries, allowing us to practice them exactly like in ancient India. But that claim is simply untrue. In the earliest Hindu scripture, the Rig Veda, more prayers are addressed to Agni and Soma than all the other gods. Today, the emphasis of our prayers is completely different. Also, in ancient times, ritual worship always employed a sacrificial fire, and it was performed outdoors in a thatched shed. There were no temples at all back then. Today, of course, most worship takes place in temples. Now, consider this. Suppose a temple in New Delhi or New York decided to maintain all the old traditions and practices exactly as they had been practiced in India hundreds of years ago. As our religious needs continue to evolve, that temple would gradually lose its ability to serve us properly. Eventually, it would cease to be a place of worship. Instead, it would become like a museum of ancient Hinduism, filled with religious artifacts, on exhibit to show how Hinduism was practiced long ago. Yet, a difficult issue remains to be addressed here. Many older Hindus are deeply attached to certain traditional practices, while younger generations consider those same practices to be old-fashioned and utterly irrelevant. So the question is, how can those traditional practices be adapted in ways that serve the needs of both generations? That's not an easy question, and I don't have a simple answer. But my guru addressed this particular issue by making an important distinction between the form and the spirit of a religious tradition. He said we should allow the forms or outward appearances of traditions to change, while at the same time we should carefully maintain the spirit or essence of those traditions. This issue will continue to be a big challenge for Hindus for generations to come. Finally, it's important to recognize that Hinduism is much more than a collection of religious traditions and practices. It also contains profound spiritual teachings, teachings about Brahman, supreme reality, teachings about the true divine inner nature of conscious beings, and teachings that address the problem of human suffering, leading to the ultimate goal of liberation. These are the teachings of Vedanta, first taught by the ancient rishis and found in the final section of the Vedas. Vedanta is not concerned with religious practices or forms of worship or matters of belief like reincarnation. Instead, Vedanta is concerned with matters of spiritual knowledge, matters of truth. Truth is universal and unchanging. What was true in ancient India is still true today, and truth is not subject to evolution or revision. If you attempt to revise a mathematical truth, like the formula for the area of a rectangle, that revision will be a corruption, not an improvement. In the same way, the essential wisdom of the rishis cannot be revised or improved upon, though the style and language of their teachings will continue to be adapted to meet the needs of each succeeding generation of spiritual seekers.
All right. Interesting enough, the first few misconceptions would be, I think, what most people would think. The caste system, the multiple gods. What else? That's all I could remember, honestly, because those are the ones that, to me, were the ones I know in a way, and what I feel that most people probably know. So anyways, that's my reaction to the top 10 misconceptions about Hinduism. If you like my content, please consider subscribing. Thumbs up, thumbs down below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next vid.